Welcome back to the CCCNews Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Goodwin, and joining me today is Kenny LaPoint of Mid-Columbia Community Action Council. Today we're going to be discussing the regional approach to houselessness, the programming that MCCAC has got going on, and a number of other really interesting and important things that are impacting our community. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Kenny.
Thanks for having me.
So just tell us a little bit about MCCAC's strategy for ending homelessness in our region.
Yeah, so Mid-Columbia Community Action Council is really the lead organization along with Washington Gorge Action Programs on the Mid-Columbia Houseless Collaborative, which is a collaborative of 40-plus organizations across Hood River, Wasco, Sherman, Klickitat, and Skamania counties that we stood up about a year ago. We developed a strategic plan in partnership with all of the community partners, with people with lived experience, with our board, with elected officials, and we developed a strategic plan on how we're going to address homelessness in the region. We really have 4 priority areas in that strategic plan, which includes shelter, permanent housing, services, and advocacy. So we see those things as the 4 primary areas of focus that we need to intentionally make actions on in order to address homelessness in our region. And, we have shelters that Mid-Columbia Community Action is operating, but that is not the permanent fix for the situation we're in right now. We really need to have permanent housing, but we also need to have services that help people be successful in that housing so that they don't, get kicked out and then end up on the street.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-layered problem with multi-layered solutions. That's what I'm hearing. Like you said, MCCAC has really been leading the charge of what is probably the most collaborative and state-supported effort to address the issue that we've seen in the history of our town. Can you speak a little bit to how MCCAC and the Mid-Columbia Housing Collaborative Partnerships came to be, how you managed to unite all these people towards this common goal?
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of process. We kind of fell into it, I suppose. Actually, Providence Health Systems reached out to me about the middle of 2022 and said, if we gave you some funding to develop a regional strategic plan, could you pull partners together on both the Oregon and Washington side of the gorge, recognizing that clients go across the river, they receive services on both sides, they don't see the boundaries that our communities have, our county lines, our city lines, our river that breaks apart the 2 states. So we needed to pull together both sides of the river to do that work. So they gave us some funding to develop a strategic plan. So we went out and brought in some assistance, some strategic planning assistance in the way of people. We began to convene these 40-plus organizations across the region. These are, social service providers, shelter providers, culturally specific service providers serving the Native and Latinx communities, community health workers, hospitals, elected officials. We brought them together to develop a strategic plan, and we went through a number of meetings to determine what our priorities were going to be, which, as I mentioned, shelter, housing, services, and advocacy were easily the top 4 things we needed to focus on. And interestingly, we were getting close to the completion of our strategic plan, and the Oregon legislature was working on a bill called House Bill 4123 at the time, which funded regional collaboratives to develop a strategic plan to address houselessness. And we said, we want to be a part of this, but we don't need that money to develop a strategic plan because we're already there. We want money to implement that strategic plan and to stand up an office that will coordinate that work. That office is the Housing Stabilization Office within Mid-Columbia Community Action Council that oversees the Houseless Collaborative. So we have a team that's working on continuing that work, updating our strategic plan, reporting out on the strategic plan. We were at the meeting in Goldendale a couple of weeks ago where we helped to support WAGAP, our partner provider, Washington Gorge Action Programs, as they are working to address houselessness in their communities. So It was a big effort. We were on the front end of it, and we were the first region in the state to have a strategic plan completed, ratified, approved by the local government. So it's important to note that Wasco County, Sherman County, Hood River County, the city of Hood River, and the city of the Dalles have all supported the actions. They've supported the strategic plan, and there is an advisory committee made up of an elected official from each of those bodies. So they're sort of overseeing that strategic plan, weighing in on it. They're an advisory committee, so they've ratified the plan, and each county government has signed an MO. Each county and city government on the Oregon side has signed as part of an MOU saying we're going to support this strategic plan.
I mean, to me, that's really amazing. It seems like there was like a lot of really good timing that occurred to make all of this happen, as well as a lot of willingness amongst all these bodies to work together to start tackling the issue of homelessness. I mean, I feel like that's something as a community member I like to see. I like to see this collaboration amongst our organizations. I think there's lots of people doing good work, and it's important not to be in silos because we learn so much from each other. And let's see.
Can't do it alone either. I mean, Mid-Columbia Community Action is going to hold a piece of the role, but we need partner organizations. Inchiwana Housing does a great job of serving the Native community. We don't need to step into that. They have the cultural connectivity to those communities, and they should be the lead on providing services there. The Oregon Human Development Corporation, the Next Door, are very good at serving the Latinx and agricultural worker communities. And so we want to, lean into the work that they do already. We're not going to be a healthcare provider. One Community Health, strong partner from a physical health standpoint and providing on-site services at all of our locations. So Mid-Columbia Center for Living, we need them. We need them to be strong. We need them to be doing really well. And under Al Barton's leadership, they've been doing such a great job at improving their services and their the collaboration in the region. And so we're excited to have them all at the table because we need them.
Yeah. Well, that's all really great to hear. Speaking of all of your different sites and your facilities, this year MCCAC received Project Turnkey 2.0 money to renovate an old hotel and transform it into a transitional living space to stabilize those experiencing houselessness and help them transition into housing. This project was done in downtown The Dalles, and MCCAC refers to this facility as the Annex, correct? So can you tell me a little bit about how things are going at the Annex? What's occupancy like? What's the impact this is having on our community, and how many people have you managed to run through this program so far?
Yeah, so the Annex, which is actually titled that because it's the Annex of the Gloria Center, which interestingly, the Gloria Center project or the Navigation Center started before the Annex was even conceived of because that opportunity wasn't there. But the Annex of the Gloria Center was completed before the actual Gloria Center was completed, but that's the naming connectivity there.
Got it. I did have some questions. I was trying to figure out why.
Yeah, there's connectivity in the naming, but we acquired that property on February 1st of this year, 2023, and we did a significant remodel. The buildings were in terrible shape. The plumbing was in terrible shape. We're still working on that today. But we did about a $2 million rehab, which included replacing all the carpet with hard surface flooring, painting the rooms, new roofs, new parking lots, a lot of just basic infrastructure. And, you've been in there. It's not fancy. They're kind of like dorm rooms. We got, new bunk beds in the rooms, some storage lockers in each of the rooms. We've set up a pantry there so people have food access. We have a laundry rooms, 3 laundry rooms on the site for client use, a commercial laundry room for us to wash bedding and things of that nature. So we really did a huge remodel, and everybody notices in the community. People were worried that this, facility was, cause this side of downtown to really, go downhill. And it's done the opposite of that. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, and some of that feedback from people who opposed the project on the front end and said, wow, this really does look really great. And we've been running that site. We've actually been running it since August 28th, which is when we moved all of our pallet shelter clients over to the facility. We were kind of doing a test run on the infrastructure, and we didn't want to overload ourselves. We wanted to see how things were operating, which was a good thing we did that, because we had plumbing challenges that we needed to mitigate, getting all, everybody's showers running and the sinks running and everything. And so we did some additional renovations after that. We did sort of our official grand opening on October 12th. That was really highlighting the opening of the family side of the shelter. So we have, two separate buildings. The building furthest to the west is the family side. What's unique about that is this is the first family shelter on the Oregon side of the gorge. So the Washington side has family shelter. This was our first family shelter. We were actually placing families in the old Oregon Motor Motel prior to acquiring the hotels. So we were already utilizing the space. Now it's just much more suited for families. It's much more suited for the clients. The building looks better. We have 24/7 oversight of the property. So we have staff. We have MCCAC staff that are there day to day from 8 a.m. to about 10 p.m. We have security that's on site overnight. We have an on-site manager that lives at the annex. So great oversight of the project. We still need more staff, so I'm not going to hide that fact, but we need a few more staff. Center for Living is hiring a couple of folks who are going to be stationed at the annex, and then we have one more position open right now. We're not at full occupancy because of that, so we want to make sure that we have the supports in place to help people be successful, and we can't do that if we're understaffed. So we need to hire these other positions so we can get to full capacity. Today we have about 40 people that are staying in the annex. Just last night, we moved our first family into permanent housing. It was a family of 6 that actually moved into permanent housing, which was awesome to have them come in and hand their keys in, and they were super excited. People from within the community that work in the community. So we're glad to have that success story. We have a total of 8 people that have been rehoused so far, but that's the first family that's been rehoused. Yeah. So we're super excited about that. We actually had a veteran person who was rehoused within 1 week of coming over to the annex. So we look forward to more of that. That's why we do this work. The goal is to get people into permanent housing, because shelter is not the permanent solution. Housing is the permanent solution, and that's our goal.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. I've lived here most of my life, and I think that the improvements made to that facility are really incredible, and I really enjoy walking like the fence that you guys put up, nice wooden fence, and seeing that it's beautiful for the residents there as well. It's not like over the top, but it is much more homey, and it feels like a place of hope. So speaking of, facilities and stuff, so we're in the middle of winter right now. And here in the Gorge, we can get severe weather warnings, which can put those experiencing homelessness at risk of bodily harm or even death. So how does MCCAC respond to severe weather warnings? I know in the past we had here in the Dalles at another facility, a kind of winter warming shelter, which has since been shut down. But I believe there is still some sort of severe weather warning shelter that is running. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and just to kind of backtrack us a little bit, when MCCAC first took over the pallet shelter site in the Dalles, that shelter was only supposed to be a winter seasonal shelter. And we advocated for it to become a year-round shelter because we realized, we knew this. We didn't come to realize it. We already know this. It's kind of obvious that when winter ends, people go back outside. So the problem doesn't go away. And I mentioned our goal is that permanent housing solution. Having an overnight shelter or just a short-term winter shelter does not allow us to connect people to the services that they need to move on into permanent housing. And so we really needed to make sure our sites could operate in a way that we could connect people to services. You can't do that in the middle of the night. You have to do that during the daytime. If you're going to go meet with landlords when you're trying to get people into housing, landlords aren't going to come meet you at an apartment at 3 a.m. They're going to go there, during the middle of the daytime. So we needed to be able to connect people to services. So we advocated for that. We got the shelter to be year-round. When we got the shelter to be year-round, we started connecting people with housing services and really focusing on permanent housing placement. Last year, in 2022, we placed 115 people into permanent housing out of shelter. So far this year, 95 people have been placed into permanent housing out of shelter. So we're having a lot of success. If we don't have those 95 or 115 people, all of them continue to need to access the shelter system on a year-to-year basis. Transitional long-term shelter is better than winter emergency shelter. Winter emergency shelter serves a purpose of keeping people safe, right, in severe weather events. Our plan right now for severe weather events is we've set aside a couple of rooms in the annex that we call surge capacity rooms. So we have enough, I think we have somewhere around 10 beds, which is what we saw during winter warming last year. That's how many people came into the winter warming shelter we offered last year. So we set aside that many beds at the annex so we can open surge capacity beds when the weather hits threshold, sort of our threshold levels, which is a severe weather advisory has to be issued, and that's triggered by the National Weather Service. And it says basically it's going to be super cold or super wet or very snowy for a sustained period of time. Same thing happens in the summertime when things get really, really hot. It has to be sustained. It's not 105 degrees for 45 minutes. It's longer periods of time. The additional sort of caveat there is we have to have staffing capacity to support those people. And then the other thing is they still have to comply with our community expectations. There is no scenario where I'm going to waive safety precautions and guidelines to accommodate somebody. That jeopardizes the safety of my staff, it jeopardizes the safety of the other clients, and it jeopardizes the safety of the entire community. And we have an obligation to make sure that all of those people are as protected as they can be by our team and our operational policies. So, again, we have to operate off of that, but we will be providing surge capacity shelter for folks who are willing to come in and comply with those community expectations for a 12-hour period. Those expectations are pretty easy. You can't use drugs actively in the room that you're in or on the site. And I'll just note that those are insurance requirements. My insurance company won't even insure our buildings if we don't have those operational policies in place. You also cannot fight me or my staff. Probably an obvious one to most of us, but it is not obvious when we set these things up. So we have dealt with that on multiple occasions. And again, we've got to protect everybody on the site. And the other sort of notion I want to throw out there is a lot of folks are saying we need to have a no barrier shelter, low barrier shelter. And I sort of respond to that with, there's no such thing. Whenever you remove a barrier for one person, you create a barrier for another person. If I say you can actively use drugs in my facility, I put somebody who's in recovery at risk of their recovery, right? So then they may fall back into using again, and that is not a success. That's the opposite of what we want. So we have an obligation to make sure that folks are protected. We also, have to have guidelines. We don't allow sex offenders, and we can't allow arsonists, convicted arsonists in our facility. Those are, again, insurance requirements, but the sex offender piece is really tough because that population doesn't really have many places to go. But we have families with children. We have people who have experienced domestic violence. We have an obligation to protect them, and we need to make sure we're doing that. So that's why we put those guidelines in place. For the future, after this year, the Gloria Center is going to be done, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. The Gloria Center is going to have an emergency severe weather shelter on that site, and that will become the future. So the annex surge beds will go away, and we'll use the Gloria Center.
Yeah, wow. So much to talk about there. I definitely have heard in the community, questions about low barrier versus what you have at MCCAC, which is there are barriers. You have to be able to comply with rules. You have to be at a state in your life where you are mentally, physically able enough to comply with those basic rules. And I mean, kind of like you said, really that work of getting people to that point where maybe they could comply is work that has to be done, I'm assuming, through like your partner organizations, through One Community Health, through public health, through, addiction disorder advocates working with the clientele. I think we're going to have to come back to that because I do want to ask about the Gloria Center as well. So let's talk about that. MCCAC started construction on the Gloria Center, this one-stop service center for those experiencing houselessness and housing instability or poverty, that's going to contain this emergency shelter and host wraparound services and resources. What stage is that project in currently, and when might this new facility be ready to serve the public?
Yeah, the project's in the cool phase right now. Like, it's actually happening. We've been talking about this. I think I've been working on this project for 2.5 years or somewhere around that time frame, and it's located on West 7th Street, kind of over by the movie theater. So we broke ground in March of this year, and that literally was just groundbreaking. Like, we were moving dirt around. Contractors were moving dirt around, putting utility lines in, doing all the grading work, chunking up rock, doing all that kind of stuff. Well, in October, everything changed because we ordered a pre-engineered steel building, and that building arrived on the site and sort of went up like an erector set. Like, it went up fast. And if you go out there today, the roof is on, the windows are on, the parking lot's in. We barely got the parking lot in before we had some colder weather, which would have prevented getting concrete down and the asphalt down. But we have parking lot. The pallet shelters have been moved as of a couple weeks ago. They were moved from the previous location in the port. They were moved over to the site where they're being staged and set up. It is getting close to being sealed in, which means we'll be ready to start doing like the interior finishing work, getting the flooring in, putting the drywall in, doing all of that stuff. So we're moving at a really quick pace over there. It went up fast. 2 months since October 1st, and we have a building up there. If you drive by, you can see what's going on. There's siding on. We expect right now, we had a little bit of a delay with the snow a couple weeks ago because we had to stop doing the roofing work, but we expect that the building's going to be done on March 15th. That's our current timeline right now, is for it to be completed by then. Well, then MCCAC will be moving its current offices from downtown to that location. We need new offices. I'll just note that because when I first came on in November of 2020, we had 8 or 9 staff at MCCAC, and today I think we have 38. So we're in like a 1,500 square foot building downtown. So we don't have enough office space for our staff to support clients, to meet with clients, have confidential meeting spaces. This will provide that. A lot of the other agencies have grown as well, or they don't have sort of sustainable office space. So they'll be moving into that space with us. DHS will have eligibility benefits determination being done there. The Oregon Human Development Corporation will be in there with us. They're moving their DALS office to that location. Mid-Columbia Center for Living will have staff there. Inchiwana Housing will be moving their office from their current location to this spot. The Columbia Gorge Health Council just approved at the Health Council meeting last night for them to move in, so they'll be moving in with us. So it'll be a great partnership location. Again, like you said, idea is one-stop shop. You come in, you can get services from multiple agencies. We don't need to send you all over the gorge anymore. We can get it done for the most part in one space. So ease of access, shelter on site. We also have an additional about 1.2 acres of property on that site that we're hoping to build permanent housing on in the future.
Wow. I have to say, all of MCCAC's projects seem to have happened like fairly quickly. Like, you've been talking, like you have been working on this project for 2.5 years, something like that. But once you've gone into the construction phase, it's happened really fast. Are you using local contractors?
Yeah, we've prioritized using local contractors in all of our projects. One of the reasons we hired Bremett Construction to do the work on the Navigation Center is because they had local contractor experience. they had experience working with local contractors from the gorge. So they've done things like community college projects. They've done Mount Hood Meadows projects. So they're familiar with the region. We've got multiple local subcontractors out there. With the annex, our $2 million rehab, 21 of the 24 contractors that we used, or 22 of the 24 contractors that we used, were from the gorge, and most of them from the Dalles area. So that means that $2 million is circulating in the community again, and that's a huge economic benefit for our community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And shout out to all those guys for doing a great job. Guys and girls and non-binary people.
Yes.
So you have all these great services that we've talked about, but we do have a certain population of people that choose not to access these services. Recently, you spoke about this at a public meeting on houselessness in Goldendale, and about MCCAC's previous street outreach to service-resistant populations of those experiencing houselessness. Can you explain a little bit about service-resistant populations and the strategies that organizations are using to try and reach them?
Yeah. And it's a great question because it's the question that maybe is not asked. I think people drive down the street in our community and they wonder, as they should, why there's still people living outside if we have these resources available in the community. And the reason is because there's populations of people that don't want the strings that are attached with accessing those resources, which is you can't create a safety issue for everyone else who's helping provide those services or who is also accessing those services at the same time. And that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to safety. I have an obligation to protect my staff. I have an obligation to protect the people that are staying at our sites. And in order to do so, that means sometimes we have to say no to people who are posing a danger to others. And whether that's through drug use or through violent acts, we have to protect our people. And we do everything in our power to make sure that we're giving people options to connect to other services that will help them be successful. So Mid-Columbia Center for Living is a core partner on all of our projects, and they are currently hiring a couple people that are going to be stationed at the annex. The reason for that is because we have folks that come in and may be service resistant, and we need Center for Living to try and help them get there to where they can connect with services because there's behavioral health challenges. So that's one strategy, right? Is let's bring in the partner organization that has behavioral health expertise. We're homeless service providers. They're not the same thing. Homelessness 10 years ago looked a lot different than it does today. It was, if you could say it was easier, it was. It's definitely more challenging. There's more issues with the population. I think in a piece that CCC News put out a couple weeks ago, there was a gentleman who was quoted that says, "We live by different rules outside." And that is definitely what we're seeing. And those rules are not the rules that MCCAC has. We have rules that we have to have people comply with. Those rules, again, for safety of community, they're also insurance requirements. Like we've got to have them for insurance requirements. So the other thing that we're doing, which is also a Center for Living partnership, is we've been working with Center for Living to braid funding with them so that, well, one thing we realized is as we were doing street outreach at MCCAC, we realized that a lot of the folks we're interacting with, we don't have the technical capacity to work with them because they have behavioral health challenges. It really needed to be Center for Living that was connecting with those clients. And so we've worked with CFL to develop a strategy that includes braided funding where they're able to open up their client pool beyond those who are already registered Center for Living clients. So that partnership will hopefully soon here, we're hoping to get something up and going in the first quarter of 2024, we'll develop a street outreach team that has sort of a broad ability to work with the clientele, that the folks who are still living outside who are service resistant. So they can go in, engage with them, create relationships with them, and hopefully get them signed up for Center for Living Services, and then connect them to resources like the Annex. Because somebody is unwilling to get into the Annex today, doesn't mean that tomorrow when they're willing, they can't get in. So we want them to get there. We just need them to also be willing to comply with the community guidelines and expectations that we have that create safe communities.
Yeah, I would say too that service-resistant population is definitely the most visible population here in our communities. They're the ones I hear the most public comments about, and I think that I'm very glad to hear that this is a partnership that's occurring between these organizations to kind of start continuing that work to address that, because there's so many individual reasons that each person may have for not wanting to be involved in services, and that can look like some of the more common ones, which are addiction or just not being mentally stable enough. But we also see instances of like people that I feel personally when I've interacted with them have just no trust in the system to help them, and believe that legitimately believe that everyone is out to get them. And that is something I think can only be healed through those connections with, social workers, and having that connection to someone who does care about them and help them move through the system. So,
yeah, there's bigger, I think, things at play. Dealing with a mental illness, we actually, we have folks in that situation at the Annex, and it's not, unachievable to work with those clients. If you overlay substance use, especially with sort of like, people are referring to modern day meth, and then you have fentanyl on top of that. The combination of or separated, those two drugs are like destroying people. They're destroying people's ability to make rational decisions for themselves. People are choosing to live outside because in their minds that's safe. They can safely use outside, and they're choosing that because that's what they need on a day-to-day basis. And so that has complicated things a lot. And so we're sort of dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. When we have interactions at the Annex a lot with folks from outside, in fact, the biggest challenges we have at the Annex is people from outside coming over to our site and becoming a safety challenge. Like literally, we've had people come over and try and fight our security guard with a lead pipe. I think folks know, like the day after we opened the Annex, we had a houseless person who was seemingly a behavioral health client on drugs, substance use, who came over and spray painted our whole building and roughly cost us $15,000 to repair our new building. And our clients were pretty upset at the Annex because this is their home now, and somebody had come in and destroyed it. And we were pretty upset too because we just had our grand opening. So we're battling with that. But we're not turning our backs on people. We, again, still need to have our rules, have our community expectations. We're not turning our back on it. We're trying to figure out how we can get people in to receive services as much as possible. So we still have hope in people, but we do have to hold the line.
Yeah, I hear that. And I will say it's one of the things that I've admired about you and watching you do this work, that you hold the complexity of it really well. Because it's not just everyone's great or everyone's bad. It's everyone's a human being that's complicated. And some of those human beings cost us $15,000. And some of those human beings give us a reason to keep hoping and to keep doing this work. So I just want to share that with you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I think the other thing that I want to say on sort of that note is like one of the biggest things that people are experiencing that leads to these other issues, behavioral health conditions, is historical trauma. And, we all have it. I have it. And I could, Maybe sometime I'll tell you what it is. But I've got it. I have family. My family has it. We all have historical trauma, and some of us were born not because of anything that we did, but we were born with mental resiliency to be able to withstand that. But some people weren't born with that. That's nothing that they chose. They just weren't born with the mental resiliency, and they encountered a traumatic event that changed their lives, that changed their minds. And we need to recognize that, and we need to dig into the root of the trauma that people are experiencing if we're really going to address the root of homelessness. It's not get a job. It's no, you need to deal with the fact that your stepfather molested you when you were 3 years old, and you don't even have the ability to recognize that right now because it created such a mentally traumatizing event in your life. And that's something that's real. It's real for people. That doesn't change that we still have to keep people safe. It doesn't change that. We still have to keep them safe, but we also are compassionate for the fact that people have trauma in their lives that impacted them to this day, and they may not even know it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's just a really good call to action for folks to always, try to show compassion and still hold boundaries around it. We can show compassion to people and also say, you can't hurt me. That's not okay.
Yeah, you don't get to...
You don't get to re-traumatize me.
Yeah, you don't get to relieve trauma by traumatizing someone else.
So definitely, MCCAC is providing a lot of opportunities for people to engage in this local and regional solution to houselessness. And you take a real one-on-one approach to lifting people up out of poverty and housing insecurity. And like we've just talked about, you're doing this work to bring an increased sense of understanding of the systemic causes and the local solutions to houselessness, on top of providing services to those who are most impacted by these issues. The need for housing solutions across the state is incredibly high. This isn't just in our region, and the stakes for those experiencing houselessness are even higher. But every time I step foot in your facilities, I am struck by the culture of hope that MCCAC continues to cultivate amongst our staff and amongst our clients. In the face of all this complexity, how do you keep your head up in the face of this adversity? And moving forward in this work, what is your hope for the state and the region to do the same?
Wow, those are great questions and wonderful accolades of our organization, because the hope piece is what I am trying to impart. Is that the rules, people want to say it's rules, we're not dictators or anything like that. It's higher expectations of what people can achieve. And a lot of the folks that we serve, nobody believed in them before. And we feel obligated to impart hope to them and say, you can be better. It's not that we're wanting to say, you can't keep your room super dirty and have drugs on the floor. It's because we believe you can do better than that. We believe there is a better future for you. And if we don't believe that for our clients, they're not going to believe that for themselves. So we feel obligated to that. We do that with our buildings. So when we first took over the annex, like I said, people were saying, we're going to destroy the fabric of downtown. Now they see the building and they say, it's too nice for those people. And my response is, maybe your expectations are too low for our community. Maybe they need to be higher. And I believe that to be true. I believe that our community should have better expectations for everybody living in it. And it's not like we're not having to make a decision between whether we should shelter people in nice environments and whether we should have nice schools. We should have both. Right? There should be both values that are embedded in the community. They don't need to be, we can have this or we can have that. We can have them both. We just need to believe that that is what we want as a community. So we're imparting that value set for our people. As far as for me, how I continue to impart that myself is like, I see the family of 6, give us the keys that they gave us last night and the smiles that were on their faces that they were successful and achieved the goal that they set out to in like half the time that they thought it would take, right? That means a lot. And them going into their permanent housing is going to allow another family to come in that place. So that helps me maintain my sanity. My team supporting me helps me maintain my sanity. We have a great team at MCCAC. My board has been very supportive. The city of the Dalles has been very supportive. So we had so much opposition at the onset of the annex and the Navigation Center when we announced that. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of negative energy, right? Where you have negative energy, you have to have positive energy on the other side. And this community came out in full force, and the positive energy outweighed all of the negative energy. And we had hundreds of volunteers come and assist us at the annex, putting furniture together, people doing food drives, donation drives, like just making sure that we had what we needed to be supported. We literally stopped defending ourselves because people were doing it for us. So that positive energy came in on the other side. That's how energy works. You have negative energy, you get positive energy. I'm so happy with the community here coming in and being that positive energy we needed. And I've always said it, Sheriff McGill sort of led that charge, right? Like he stood up for us in town hall meetings and said, MCCAC is doing what they should be doing and we should be supporting them. So I'm proud to be in the position that I'm in. I'm fortunate to be in the position I'm in and have this community support us.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today, and I wish you the best of luck in your work going forward.
Thanks for having me.
This is Cole Goodwin with CCC News. Thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast, and we'll see you next time.